Tonight, Ayla Voss carries a dying young woman into the silver threshold, a place older than Veilport's laws and safer than any street above it. Inside Soren's hidden salon, the truth of the Ashening begins to sharpen. This plague was made, its victims were chosen, and someone powerful is still moving in the dark. Before the night is over, old secrets will surface, fragile alliances will tighten, and Ayla will step back into a world that is finally starting to notice her. The Midnight Healer Original Urban Fantasy Audiobook Series. Episode 3. Soren Salon. Some places exist outside the rules. The rules know better than to complain. Veilport is a coastal city built atop intersecting ley lines, populated by both ordinary humans and the veiled, magical beings who live among them under the governance of an ancient accord called the Veil. The Ashening is an engineered magical plague currently spreading through the veiled community, stripping its victims first of their magic, then their memories, then their will to live. Ayla Voss, the last of a dying order of healers, is working to understand and stop it. She does not yet know who built it, only that someone did. The Silver Threshold, Midnight. There are places in every city that the city itself does not fully acknowledge. Alleyways that are slightly longer inside than outside. Courtyards that appear on no municipal map. Buildings that have been officially empty for 40 years, but whose windows are lit every night without fail. Veilport had more of these than most cities. It was the ley lines, the old-timers said. Ancient channels of power running beneath the cobblestones like roots beneath soil, invisible, vast, essential. The city had grown up around them, and around them, in turn, certain things had. The Silver Threshold was one of those things. To find it, you had to know to look for a bookshop. The shop called, with either irony or complete sincerity, Margins, occupied a narrow 3-story building on Voss Lane in the Old Quarter, just south of where the streets stopped having names and simply became numbers carved into the stone. Its window was always lit with a warm amber glow. Its hours were posted as 9 to midnight, 6 days a week, closed Tuesdays. No one who mattered paid attention to those hours. Inside, between a shelf of atlases and a display of hand-bound journals, there was a door. It was not marked. It was not hidden precisely. It was simply unremarkable enough that the human eye slid past it the way water slides past a stone, following the path of least resistance. But if you were veiled, if there was magic in your blood, however faint, however old, the door did something peculiar when you approached it. It warmed. Not in a way you could verify to anyone's satisfaction. Not in a way that showed up on any instrument. But you felt it, the way you feel a fire 2 rooms away, and your hand went to the handle, and the door opened inward onto a staircase, and the staircase led down. 17 steps. Always exactly 17, regardless of the angle of the staircase or the memory of the person descending. Whoever had built this place had opinions about numbers. At the bottom of the 17th step, there was a second door. This one was iron, very old, inlaid with a pattern of interlocking silver circles that might have been decorative and was certainly not. Above it, cut into the lintel in script so archaic that even most veiled scholars would need a moment to parse it, was the compact that made this place what it was 4 lines of an ancient accord, older than the current form of the veil itself, declaring that the space beyond these walls was neutral ground. No blood was to be shed here. No quarrel was to be carried here. No enforcement of any veil provision was to occur within these walls. The accord was not a suggestion. Violations had consequences that the stories about this place described only obliquely, with the careful phrasing of people who had seen what happened and found they preferred not to be precise about it. The Silver Threshold. The ceiling vaulted upward into darkness that the lanterns didn't quite reach, a vaulted stone arch that had been here before the building above it, before the street, before the city had any street here to speak of. The stone was the color of old honey, warm and deep, and along its curves someone had painted constellations in silver leaf that still caught the light after however many centuries. Dozens of lanterns hung from chains and brackets, glass globes of blown amber, each one containing a small flame that was not, technically, a flame and produced no smoke, and had been burning continuously for longer than anyone currently living in Veilport could verify. Along the far wall, a carved bar of dark mahogany stretched the full length of the room, its surface worn smooth by decades of elbows and glasses. Behind it, shelves reached ceilingward, holding bottles in every shade of color imaginable, some containing liquids that moved when no one was moving them, some containing things that were not quite liquids. Stools lined the bar, most of them occupied. Tables filled the middle of the room, round ones, scarred with old burns and older carvings, surrounded by chairs that didn't match and were more comfortable than they had any right to be. The walls bore maps. Ancient ones, framed under glass, maps of coastlines that didn't exist anymore, of territories that had different names, of sea routes charted by people who knew the water had currents that the official science of their time hadn't yet admitted to. One map, near the back, showed Veilport itself, but older streets in different configurations, the harbor shaped differently, the old quarter larger and differently named. On it, in faded red ink, someone had drawn lines. They intersected beneath what was now, if you traced it correctly, approximately where you were standing. The people in the room were beautiful in the way that unusual things are beautiful, not uniformly, not conventionally, but with the particular force of things that do not quite fit the categories available to describe them. A woman near the window had eyes that shifted color as she spoke, cycling through shades of amber and green with no apparent pattern. The man beside her had hands that were, at the knuckles, slightly luminescent, not glowing, but present in the darkness in a way that hands usually were not. A group near the bar were laughing, and one of them, when she threw her head back, briefly showed teeth that were too numerous and arranged in too many rows, and then her mouth closed, and she was simply a tall woman with a warm laugh. And there, moving through all of it with the easy confidence of a man who has been the most important person in every room he has entered for several hundred years, was Soren Ashveil. He wore a charcoal Victorian frock coat over dark trousers, the coat's lapels edged in a thread that caught the lantern light and turned briefly silver before going dark again. His hair was long, silver-white, pulled back loosely. Some of it escaped around his face in a way that might have been careless or might have been precisely calculated. His ears came to a point so slight that a stranger might have attributed it to bone structure, to ancestry, to an unusual face. Those who knew better knew better. His eyes were the color of deep glacier ice, pale and lit from within, and when they found you across a room, you felt it before you saw it, a small, particular kind of attention, complete and exact as a scalpel. 3 silver rings on 3 fingers. His left hand, always. He had been wearing them the last time the city was mapped differently, and he would be wearing them long after any current cartographer had cause to care. Soren greeted Brix with amused concern, noting the umbral reserve in his glass and the story written plainly across his face. Brix answered with his usual gruff deflection, insisting that his face was minding its own business. Soren, delighted by the lie, observed that Brix's face had not successfully minded its own business in 26 years, which he found tremendously useful. Brix let out a sound that was almost a laugh. The weaving contract had fallen through. The client had chosen a truth binder instead, dismissing bloodwork as old-fashioned. Soren found the judgment delightfully contemporary and promised to find Brix another client by Thursday, preferably one with better taste and more pressing problems. At a nearby table, Soren gently interrupted 2 women speaking in urgent whispers and offered either help or absolute privacy, both of which he was capable of arranging. The women exchanged a glance. One of them, younger, her fingers trembling slightly around her glass, made a small, involuntary sound of relief. Soren sat. He listened for exactly 4 minutes, asked 3 questions, and spoke for approximately 90 seconds. Whatever he said, the younger woman's hands stopped trembling. The older one pressed her lips together in the expression of a person who has received news that is better than they feared and not as good as they hoped, which is, most days, the best available outcome. He paused. His hand rested, briefly, on the back of an empty chair at a table near the middle of the room. The chair was not tucked in. It sat at a slight angle, as if someone had stepped away from it and would be back shortly. There were 3 other chairs at the table, all occupied by people engaged in conversation. No one said anything about the 4th chair. They had not mentioned it in 3 weeks. Soren's hand rested there for 2 seconds, no more. His expression did not change in any way that was visible. Then he moved to the bar, poured himself a glass of something clear and very still, and turned to face the room with the composed, easeful expression of a man whose establishment was doing exactly what he built it to do, and who was content, and who would not under any circumstances tell you what he had just thought about. Scene 1. The arrival. The room did not go silent. That was the interesting thing. It did not go silent the way a room does when something alarming enters, the abrupt, breath-held quiet of self-preservation. Instead, it went quiet the way a room does when something significant arrives. Slow, respectful. The conversations didn't stop so much as they suspended themselves, held in place like a held note, waiting. Ayla Voss came through the door with a young woman in her arms. She was carrying her the way you carry someone who cannot carry themselves, one arm beneath the knees, one supporting the shoulders, her body angled slightly forward under the weight. Lira was slight, but dead weight is never light, and Ayla had brought her down 17 stone steps in the dark, and the effort showed in the set of her jaw and the particular brightness of her eyes that had nothing to do with emotional restraint and everything to do with the effort of not stumbling. She wore her indigo coat, the ritual one, the one that had once been the standard garment of her order and was now simply hers, slightly too large across the shoulders where her grandmother had been broader. Faded at the elbows from years of a practice that had required her to press her arms against things she would have preferred not to. The coat was wrong in the threshold's lantern light, too much of the outside world clinging to it, cold air and rain and something sharper underneath, the faint ozone scent of active healing work. Behind her, having not been invited and having come anyway, was Kade Morrow. He stood one step inside the doorway with the instinctive positioning of someone checking sight lines. His charcoal coat was wet at the shoulders, it had been raining above. His amber-brown eyes moved across the room in a practiced sweep that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't been trained to notice it, and from somewhere in the crowd, someone noticed it, and there was the faintest sound of a chair scooting very slightly backward. The compact on the lintel kept the room honest. No one was going to do anything about a former Veil enforcer in the threshold. But the chair still moved, because bodies remember things that compacts don't cover. The reverence in the room was for Ayla. It moved like light moves through amber, warm, slowed, definite. Eyes that had been fixed on drinks or conversation found her and stayed. One woman near the window put her hand to her mouth. A man at the bar straightened slowly, the way you straighten when you are trying not to look like you are standing at attention. Someone at the table near the maps said something in a language that wasn't English, low and fervent, with the cadence of a blessing. Midnight Healer. The title was old enough that most of the people in this room had never seen one. Old enough that some of them had stopped believing there was one. The indigo coat made the belief reload itself, like a weapon that had been set aside but not unloaded. Soren set down his glass. The delight that moved across his face was quick and genuine and gone in the same moment, replaced by something more composed, not cold, not careful exactly, but deliberate. The expression of a person who has learned, across centuries, to let their first responses arrive privately and their second responses arrive publicly. He said it quietly, to no one in particular. Then he moved. Ayla weighed the cost of resisting him, then carried Lira through the door behind the bar, with Kade following close behind. The room behind the bar was small and exact. A narrow bed against one wall, clean linen, instruments Ayla did not have words for, and shelves of labeled bottles written in the formal notation of the healer's practice. Ayla laid Lira on the bed. The young woman's breathing remained slow, even and wrong, like a body that had retreated into its most basic systems. Her still hands had once played glass harmonica, and the knowledge mattered in a way Ayla could not yet name. Soren recognized the Ashening at once. His certainty was not dramatic, it was worse than that. It was practiced. Kade stood very still in the corner, watching with amber eyes and cataloging everything in silence. Scene 2. The diagnosis. Soren did not touch Lira immediately. He stood at the foot of the bed and looked at her in the way that Ayla would come to recognize, over time, as his examination posture, still, very straight, his head slightly tilted. His ice blue eyes slightly unfocused in the way that meant he was not looking at what was in front of him, but at what lay beneath it. He was reading her the way you read a room that has had something happen in it. Not the furniture, the air. Ayla waited. She was used to silence in healing work. Her own practice required it, the deep listening that preceded any intervention. But this was a different quality of silence. Soren's silences felt inhabited, as if something was taking place in them that required no movement and no sound and absolutely required no interruption. After approximately 3 minutes, he moved to the side of the bed and did something with his left hand, the hand with the rings. He did not touch Lira. He held his hand approximately 4 inches above her sternum, palm down, and closed his eyes, and the rings on his fingers caught the room's single low lamp and did not let it go. He said it without edge. An observation of fact. Ayla stopped. The honesty of it was unusual enough that both Ayla and Kade went still. Soren did not seem like a man who said, "I don't know," very often. The words sat in the room with the weight of something rarely used. He moved to the shelf and selected a bottle without looking at the label, which meant he knew them by position. This was a man who had been using the system for a very long time. She watched his hand on the bottle. It didn't tighten. It didn't hesitate. He was very, very good. Soren turned from the shelf with the bottle and a small cup of carved bone that had been sitting beside it, and his expression was composed and pleasant and offered her absolutely nothing. He began to do something with the bottle and the bone cup, measuring, mixing, with a precision that was not laboratory precision, but something older and more embodied, the kind of knowledge that lives in the hands. There was a small hesitation, so brief that Ayla almost missed it. Scene 3. Old business. Soren admitted that he had been in Paris in 1944, though he reminded them that a great many people had been there too, most of them enduring far worse circumstances than his own. From Soren's perspective, the distinction being made did not matter. Where he had stood, the two things had been the same. Scene 4. What Lira said. Scene 5. Kade tried to stop Ayla from going alone, but the warning came too late to change the momentum of the moment. End of episode 3. The Midnight Healer continues in episode 4, The Weight of What He Knows. Love The Midnight Healer? Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share The Shadows with a friend.